Hello, I'm Pastor Paul. Welcome to the Lord of Life Lutheran Church Sermon Podcast. We're glad you're here. We know that you can't always be in worship with us, so we're glad to provide the sermons from our weekly services. We hope that you will find hope and inspiration as we have in Jesus Christ. And now, here's this week's message. The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 15th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took the place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, who killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and has been found.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. When I was a child, probably about 5 years old, my mom had taken me to the mall with her. And as boys will do when confronted with the prospect of clothes shopping, I went looking for something to entertain myself. Keep in mind, this was before smartphones or even dumb phones, and before most personal entertainment devices such as video games and the like. No, I was out there on my own looking for an opportunity for entertainment and adventure. And I found my adventure in the huge circular clothes racks that used to adorn big stores, right? You remember these? Circular clothes racks that were awesome because they were forts and tents and everything else a young boy could imagine. I don't know how much time passed between the time that my adventure started and the store employee found me and shouted across the store to my mom that he had found the lost boy. I didn't even know I was lost, for that matter. Apparently, I'd been gone for some time without realizing it, and my mom reported it to the store manager, who initiated a search. My mom, needless to say, was relieved at my return and filled with joy. I wasn't sure what to think, but I know the hug from my mom sure felt good that day. The 15th chapter of Luke's Gospel is filled with wonderful parables. 3 parables on what it means to be lost, on lost things, lost sheep, lost coins, and the lost son. What does it look like to you to be lost? Have you ever been lost? Do you want to admit that you've ever been lost? The parable of the prodigal son is the longest of Jesus' parables. The parable could rightly be called instead the parable of the loving father, because it begins as a man had 2 sons. And the main emphasis seems to be on the response of the father to a series of missteps and mistakes by his 2 sons. The context for this parable and the others on being lost are the grumbling Pharisees and legal experts who are challenging Jesus about the idea of what you eat and who you eat it with being really important for religious and non-religious divisions of people. Previous to this parable, Jesus told another parable about a great feast that was being offered, but about all the people who were too busy to come. And so the host of the feast invited everyone on the streets, even the lowliest, to come to the feast, and they came. All this to say, the feast that the Father offers upon his Son's return might be a good place for us to look. Not only are we called to welcome the ones we know and care about, but we are also called to welcome the unwelcome ones, the outsiders, those whom God loves in spite of what we may think about them. And we are to welcome, to celebrate the return of those lost ones who knew God but turned away. We all make bad choices sometimes. We all have moments when we want to take our ball and go home or turn away from those who care about us. We all, no matter how faithful we are, carry deep questions about our faith, about who God is, and at times we sway away from the embrace of God, don't we? Sometimes our pain causes us to turn in on ourselves. Sometimes seeing the pain in others causes us to want to turn away. For whatever reason, the younger son in the parable chooses to turn away, to run away, in fact, we might say, perhaps confident that he could conquer the land that he will go to, perhaps confident that a life of partying and fun would be better than a life of serving his father and brother. But then the pain comes, doesn't it? The pain comes when he realizes what he had and what he gave up. The pain comes when he realizes he has to humble himself and go back and beg for mercy. Our righteous indignation blinds us to the mirror that God holds up in front of us, and we can't see what God sees. We turn away from the pain we see in others in favor of our own pain and anger, and we feel justified. The older son, who has been faithful to his father all along, is blinded by his own pain and cannot see the pain in his brother. In fact, he refuses to even face his brother. He refuses to see the love the father has for his younger brother. It's safer here, outside the doors, outside of the party and dancing and music, celebrating the return of his brother. What does it look like to be lost? I'm often asked about what it looks like for our faith to apply in the real world each day. The news this week has been pretty grim. If you followed along, stories of survivors, of family members, of victims from school shootings losing their battles with depression, unable to face the pain and lostness in their lives. People are experiencing unprecedented flooding. Farmers are delayed in planting, and we hear many will not even be able to plant a crop this year. Larissa and I spoke with a young family who farms here in Dubuque last weekend, and they told us that they don't make enough money to cover their costs for the farming that they do. There is pain all around us. There is lostness all around us. Brené Brown, famous mostly for being a researcher and psychologist in mental health and mental wellness, perhaps best known for her TED Talk on what shame is that launched her into the limelight, this week told her story of her visit with Newtown, Connecticut, and her time working with the father who lost his battle with depression this week. She shared a powerful post on social media about the experience and about what her mother taught her about dealing with pain. She said, "My mom taught us to never look away from people's pain. The lesson was simple. Don't look away. Don't look down. Don't pretend not to see the hurt. Look people in the eye, even when their pain is overwhelming. And when you're in pain, find people who can look you in the eye. We need to know we're not alone, especially when we're hurting." The Father's love in the parable of the prodigal son, or perhaps we could rename it the parable of the loving Father, reminds me of this modern day parable that Brené Brown shared. God's love does not look away from, does not look down on our pain. Instead, God looks us squarely in the eyes in the person of Jesus Christ on the cross. "I see you," God says. "I hear you. I understand your pain. I want to forgive you. I want to heal you. I want you to know that you are welcome here." That's how our faith can align with God's love for our congregation, our community, and our world. You and I have the opportunity to express God's love for those around us by looking them in the eye and saying, "I see you, I hear you, I understand your pain. God forgives you and wants to heal you, and you are welcome here." Last week I challenged you as a congregation to fill 40 buckets for flood victims. And I'm happy to report that I think we will well exceed our goal of 40 buckets. And that's awesome. In a few weeks, we'll offer our mobile food pantry again. We'll open the doors wide once again, and we will say to all of those who come looking for food, "We see you, we love you, you are welcome here." In another few weeks, we'll install our little food pantry in the parking lot of the church so that people who are hungry can find access to something to eat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we can say to those who are food insecure, "We love you and you are welcome here." Our goal is not to turn away from the pain and lostness of others, but our goal is to be the kind of church where we know that we will find others who look us in the eye in the moments of our own deepest pain, especially when we are righteously indignant and blind to what God wants to show us in the mirror. "I see you, I love you, and you are welcome here." May we be a place with open arms, a joyous smile, and God's embrace for those who are lost and in pain. From my lips to God's ears to your hearts, may it be so. Thanks for listening to the Lord of Life Lutheran Church Sermon Podcast. If you're ever in the Dubuque-land area, please join us for worship. Visit our website at www.lordoflife.online to learn more about service times and about our vision for serving God and our community. God bless you.